On a wet October morning in 1991, Celia Marquez opened a livestock trailer in the middle of a dying pear orchard. Not a sprayer, not a chemical tank, not another copper program with a bill attached to it. She opened the trailer. And 19 wool sheep stepped down into the mud beneath the trees. That was the part the men at the co-op laughed about. Because, in the Rogue River Valley that year, fire blight was not something you answered with animals. Fire blight was answered with schedules, nozzles, antibiotics, copper residue. And the laminated spray calendar that hung beside the cash register at Pike Orchard Supply. Celia had heard that calendar quoted like scripture since she was a girl. Spray before bloom. Spray during bloom. Cut every blackened shoot 12 inches below the strike. Burn the prunings. Do it again if the weather turns warm and wet. And in the fall of 1991, everyone had done it. The trees were still turning black. By the second week of October, the lower valley looked like somebody had dragged a match through the pear blocks and then let the rain finish the job. Bartlets, Anjous, Boschks, branch tips curled into shepherd's crooks, bark split along the young wood, pears hung hard and dark, like they had been embarrassed to ripen. Mateo Marquez had 46 acres under production, most of it planted by his father before Celia was born. He had followed the spray program exactly. He had paid $5,800 for materials he did not want to buy and another $1,400 for emergency pruning crews when the first strikes showed up in late August. By October, he was looking at a loss that might break $70,000, and the worst part was not the money. The worst part was that nobody in the valley seemed to have a better answer than the answer that was already failing. Pike Orchard Supply had sold more streptomycin that season than in any year since it opened. Warren Pike, who ran the place, had a voice that could fill a packing shed, and a way of slapping a paper invoice on the counter like it had settled the argument. He had been selling growers their spray calendars for 26 years, and most of the men in the valley trusted him more than they trusted the weather report. Warren was not stupid. He understood chemicals. He understood timing. He understood pressure charts and bloom windows and why a missed application could cost a grower half a crop. But he had one blind spot so large he mistook it for common sense. To Warren Pike, the fight happened on the tree. To Celia Marquez, the fight was also happening under it. Celia was 24 years old that fall. She had come home from Oregon State with a horticulture degree, a stack of research papers, and the kind of quiet confidence that irritated older men because it did not ask permission before existing. Her father loved her. He was proud of her. He also believed that a farm was not saved by ideas until those ideas survived weather, debt, and a bank note. So when Celia came to the kitchen table in March with a folder labeled Orchard Floor Reservoir Management, Mateo looked at it the way a man looks at a strange noise inside an engine. He did not reject it. He did not accept it. He waited. Celia opened the folder and started with the thing nobody wanted to talk about. Fire blight did not begin at the moment bacteria touched a blossom. That was only the visible part. The orchard carried the disease from season to season in infected twigs, fallen fruit, old leaf litter, cankers, and wet organic material lying beneath the canopy. The spray calendar attacked the infection event. Celia wanted to attack the amount of disease waiting to become an event. She told her father the orchard floor was not housekeeping, it was a reservoir. And if they kept treating it like background, they would keep fighting next spring with last fall's mistakes still lying under the trees. Her proposal was strange enough that her mother, Rosa, stopped cutting onions and turned around from the stove. Celia wanted sheep. Not full-size wool breeds that would strip bark and break limbs. She wanted a small mixed flock of Katahdin and Finn sheep crosses, animals light enough for the wet ground and hungry enough to work through windfalls, leaf litter, and low brush after harvest. They would rotate through the orchard in narrow strips. They would eat dropped pears and infected leaf material before it matted into the soil. Their hooves would break the sealed wet layer under the trees. Their manure would push microbial life into the surface soil, feeding the bacterial competitors that helped crowd out Erwinia before it reached the blossoms the following spring. Mateo listened without moving, then he asked the question every grower would ask. What if they eat the trees? Celia had an answer. She had breed notes, fencing plans, rotation timing, bark guard placement for young trunks, and a rough budget. The animals would cost between $1,300 and $1,700. Temporary electric netting would cost another $900 if they built the chargers themselves. Labor would be ugly the first year, better the second. Mateo asked what would happen if it failed. Celia said, then we lose money in a new way instead of the old way. It was not a joke. That was why it worked. For 3 minutes, nobody spoke. Then Mateo tapped the folder with 2 fingers, and said she could have the south block. 28 acres. Not the whole farm. The south block, where the old Bartletts stood closest to the creek and the floor stayed wet 3 weeks longer than it should. If her idea could work anywhere, it would have to work there. If it failed, it would fail where the disease was already worst. Celia said that was fair. Mateo said he did not know if fair was the word. That summer, Celia made the mistake of explaining the plan at the Valley Fruit Growers meeting. Or maybe it was not a mistake. Maybe she understood exactly what would happen and decided the record needed witnesses. The meeting was held behind the Grange Hall, in a room that smelled like coffee, damp hats, and old plywood. Warren Pike sat near the front, one boot crossed over his knee, arms folded across a jacket with his supply company patch over the pocket. Celia stood up during open discussion and talked for 5 minutes. She did not make it sound mystical. She did not say sheep were magic. She said fire blight pressure was a population problem before it became a spray problem. She said the floor below the canopy was storing infected material. She said grazing could reduce the carryover load in a way mowing and herbicide could not fully imitate. Then she gave the number that made the room shift. A 2-season orchard trial in a comparable wet floor block had shown a 34% reduction in primary strike counts after managed fall grazing. Not elimination, reduction. Enough to make the spray program fight a smaller enemy. For 2 seconds, the room was quiet. Then Warren Pike laughed. It was a big laugh, a practiced laugh, the kind of laugh that does social work. It told the room what was safe to think. Warren said he had spent half his life helping growers fight blight, and this was the first time anyone had suggested sending livestock after a bacterium. A few men smiled. One laughed too loudly because Warren had laughed first. Warren said, Miss Marquez, Erwinia is not going to look down, see a sheep, and surrender. Celia waited until the room settled. Then she said, no. But it may have fewer places to spend the winter. That line did not get a laugh. On the drive home, Mateo kept both hands on the wheel and did not speak until they were nearly to the farm road. Then, he said, Warren Pike will remember that. Celia said, so will I. The sheep arrived in September. 19 animals in all. 12 Katahdin ewes, 5 Finsheep crosses, and 2 small wethers Celia bought from a woman outside Grants Pass who wanted the flock gone before winter. The total cost was $1,560, which Celia wrote in the ledger in red pencil because she wanted to feel it. She and Mateo spent 4 weekends building the fencing system. Mateo complained about the posts. He complained about the charger. He complained about the way sheep found the only weak spot in any fence and treated it like a formal invitation. But on the second Saturday, without being asked, he ran a water line down to the south block. Celia noticed. She did not thank him in the moment. She understood that would have made him stop. By the first week of October, the flock was moving under the old Bartletts. The valley had expected a spectacle. What it got was smaller and stranger. Sheep moving slowly beneath blackened pear limbs, sheep nosing through wet leaves, sheep eating the dropped fruit that had always been too bruised to pick up and too important to ignore. Celia walked the rows every morning with a notebook in her coat pocket. She marked which strips had been grazed, how much leaf litter remained, where the soil opened under the hooves, which windfall piles disappeared, which young trunks needed more protection, and how much time each move took. She was not running a perfect experiment, she was running a farm. But she was watching like a scientist, and working like someone who knew the bank did not care about theory. The sheep did not save 1991. That mattered. By the time they entered the orchard, the infections were already in the wood. The south block lost most of its marketable fruit just like the north block did. The first season gave Celia no miracle to point at, no public victory, no sweet revenge at the next growers' meeting. Warren Pike made sure people knew it. That November, at the supply counter, he told 3 growers that the Marquez sheep had eaten very well for a flock that had not cured a single tree. Word got back to Celia by supper. Rosa watched her daughter's face across the table. Mateo did not look up from his plate. Celia only said, "They were never supposed to cure this year." And that was the sentence she had to keep repeating to herself all winter. This year was already lost. The question was what the orchard would carry into the next one. Spring of 1992 came warm, wet, and early. That is the kind of spring pear growers fear because blossoms open fast, insects move hard, and every rain event turns the tree into a delivery system. The Extension Office issued a high-pressure warning in April. Pike Orchard Supply ran out of one antibiotic product and started taking names for the next shipment. Mateo sprayed both blocks on the same schedule. Same products. Same rates. Same timing. The only difference was the floor. In the north block last year's leaf mat was still dense under the trees. In the south block, the ground looked disturbed and oddly alive. Less sealed. Less sour, more broken open. Celia had soil samples tested through the county lab and found higher counts of bacillus and fluorescent Pseudomonas groups in the top 2 inches. That did not make a headline, it made a note in her ledger. By the end of the 1992 season, the south block showed 21 visible strikes per 100 shoots examined. The north block showed 29. That was not enough to humble a room, it was enough to keep Celia awake in a different way. Not from fear this time, from calculation. She had not beaten the disease, but something had moved. She ran the sheep through the south block again that fall. This time, the fence moves took 4 hours a week instead of 7. She bought 6 more animals from the same Grants Pass flock. Rosa found a small buyer for the extra lambs, and by winter the animals were no longer only an expense in the ledger. They were still an argument, but now they were an argument with numbers under it. Warren Pike did not laugh at the next growers' meeting. That was the first sign Celia noticed. He still called it the sheep project, the way a person puts a handle on something so he does not have to call it by its proper name. But the laugh was gone. The spring of 1993 arrived like a test designed by someone with a grudge. Warm days. Wet nights, long bloom. 2 windstorms during peak opening. The Valley's Blight model flashed red for 9 straight days. Growers sprayed until the tractor tires cut ruts between the rows, and still the black strikes came. Some blocks looked infected before the petals had even fallen. Warren Pike's supply yard ran out of copper sleeves, pruning paint, and patience in the same week. Celia sprayed too. She never claimed biology replaced chemistry. That was the lie people tried to put in her mouth because it made her easier to dismiss. Her actual claim was harder to laugh away. Biology could make chemistry stop fighting alone. By August, the numbers were clear enough that Mateo stopped asking whether she had checked them twice. The South Block, after 2 fall seasons of managed grazing, showed 8 primary strikes per 100 shoots. The North Block, under the same spray program, showed 23. The Valley average that year sat between 20 and 27, depending on variety and elevation. Celia's worst wet floor block had become the cleanest block on the farm. The yield ledger made it impossible to pretend the difference was academic. The South Block produced 682 marketable boxes from 28 acres, the North Block produced 711 boxes from 46 acres, more land, almost the same spray bill, barely more fruit. When Celia converted it to gross revenue, the South Block brought in $412 per acre more than the North Block. Mateo stared at that number for a long time, not because he doubted it. Because he understood it. For 2 days, he walked the blocks before breakfast and after supper. He stopped under the old Bartletts. He pushed aside the grass with his boot, he broke apart the soil crust with his thumb. He looked at the trees the way a man looks at a friend who has told him the truth late, but not too late. On the 3rd morning, he found Celia repairing fence netting beside the equipment shed. He stood there with his coffee cooling in one hand and said, "Run them through the North Block this fall." Celia looked up. Mateo said, "All of it." Then he added, "And write down what we need to buy before prices go up." That was his apology. That was his blessing. That was his way of saying the farm had changed. The story of the sheep moved through the valley slowly at first. Farm stories do not travel like gossip, they travel like irrigation water. They need a ditch. The ditch was Celia's 1993 report. She submitted her numbers to the extension office because the extension agent, Linda Harrow, had been skeptical enough to be useful and honest enough to stay interested. Linda visited the farm in September, walked the South Block, checked Celia's strike counts, took her own samples, and asked the one question Celia respected most. What would make this fail? Celia gave her a list. Too many animals in too small a strip. Bad trunk protection, grazing too late after freeze. Letting fruit rot before the flock entered, treating the sheep like a symbol instead of a management tool. Linda wrote it all down. In January of 1994, the Extension Office issued a short bulletin on post-harvest grazing for pear orchard floor sanitation. It did not call Celia a pioneer. It did not call Warren Pike wrong. It did something better. It printed the numbers. By the next fall, 3 orchards in the lower valley had sheep in their blocks. By 1996, there were 9. Not all of them used Celia's system well. One grower overgrazed a young block and lost bark on 27 trees. Another turned animals in too late and learned that sheep are less useful after cold rain has already sealed the floor. Celia hated those failures, but she also knew they mattered. They proved this was not magic. A system that can be mismanaged is real. In 1997, Warren Pike drove down the Marquez Farm Road in a gray pickup and parked beside the equipment shed. Celia saw him from the packing room window. He looked older than he had at the growers' meeting, though only 6 years had passed. Maybe because men like Warren carry authority in their bodies, and when authority begins to change shape, the body has to admit it first. He climbed out holding a folded extension bulletin. Celia met him by the shed. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Warren said he had customers asking about grazing systems and he did not know enough to advise them properly. He said it very carefully, not as an apology, as a service problem. Celia looked at the bulletin in his hand. Then she said, "You told a room full of growers that Erwinia would not surrender to sheep." Warren looked at the south block, then back at her. He said, "I remember." Celia said, "It did not surrender. It ran out of winter quarters." Warren absorbed that. To his credit, he did not laugh. For the next 90 minutes, Celia walked him through the system. Rotation width, stocking rate, timing after harvest, trunk guards, shelter placement, water access. The difference between eating windfalls and trampling them into a sealed mat. The reason sheep were useful in older pear blocks but risky around certain young plantings. The reason the program worked best, with careful spraying, not instead of it. Warren asked good questions. That annoyed her a little, then it relieved her more than she expected. Because it meant he had not come to pretend, he had come to learn. At the end of the walk, he folded the bulletin and put it in his coat pocket. He said, "I can sell fencing." Celia said, "You can sell understanding first." He almost smiled. Almost. The next Pike Orchard Supply catalog ran 4 pages longer than the last one. Near the back, after the pruning tools, and before the sprayer parts, Warren added a section titled Orchard Floor Management. It included temporary netting, trunk guards, portable water fittings, seed mixes, and a short paragraph that said disease pressure begins before bloom and often begins below eye level. Celia read that paragraph twice. Her name was not on it. She did not need it to be. By 2000, Mateo had stopped calling the animals Celia's sheep. He called them the floor crew. By then the flock had grown to 38 animals, the rotation plan covered every bearing block, and the Marquez farm had reduced emergency blight pruning by more than half in ordinary pressure years. The farm did not become rich, that is not how orchard stories usually work. It became steadier. That was better. Steady meant the bank note got paid. Steady meant old Bartletts that should have been removed kept producing. Steady meant Celia could try cover crops in the alleyways without betting the whole farm on one more experiment. Steady meant Mateo could stand at the edge of the south block in the evening and look less like a man bracing for weather. In 2004, Celia's son, Tomas, came to the kitchen table with a notebook of his own. He was 11 years old and had drawn a plan for beetle banks along the drainage swale. Marrow-raised strips planted with bunchgrass and flowers to shelter predatory insects through winter. He explained it too quickly. He mispronounced half the Latin names. He had dirt on one sleeve and the full confidence of a child who had grown up believing the orchard floor was allowed to matter. Celia listened. Mateo sat at the end of the table, older now, quieter, his hands folded around a coffee mug. When Tomas finished, Celia looked at the notebook and remembered herself at 24, standing in a Grange hall while Warren Pike laughed. She remembered the south block. The red pencil. The first 19 sheep stepping down into the mud, then she looked at her son and said, "Show me where you want the first strip." Tomas blinked. He had expected conditions, a trial corner. A smaller, yes. Celia gave him the whole question. Mateo stood up, took the notebook, and studied the drawing. Then he said the drainage swale was too wet for the seed mix Tomas had chosen. But he had a better bunchgrass in the barn and they could test germination before ordering more. Tomas grinned like he had just been handed a kingdom. Maybe he had. The Marquez orchard is still there, The Old South block still produces, though no packing house accountant would have predicted that in 1991. The Bartlett trunks are thick and scarred, the way old working trees become when they have survived enough bad seasons to stop looking ornamental. Every fall, after harvest, sheep move under them, not as a novelty, not as a miracle. As part of the work. And that is the part people finally understood. Celia did not save the orchard because she hated the spray calendar. She saved it because she saw what the calendar had been trained not to see. The tree was not alone. The blossom was not the beginning, the disease was not only in the blackened shoot. The orchard had a memory under its feet. For years the valley had fought fire blight by looking up. Celia made them look down. And that was where the answer had been waiting.